Welcome to another Genre Art with JB. My name is James, and welcome back to this belated YouTube video. I'm a little out of it because it's late here on the East Coast. It's 10:25 p.m. right now. But basically, I wanted to just share with you guys an update on this piece I'm working on, this piece of Foundation fan art featuring the mule and one of his slaves, I guess. A mule sitting on his throne in Calgon. And I also wanted to basically touch back on the subject of Dune. You know, the Dune trailer came out, and I was really intrigued by it. And being that we focus on sort of genre art, sci-fi on this channel, and right now the thrust of what I'm doing are these Asimov fan art pieces. You know, Asimov was a huge influence on Herbert. And then Herbert basically took the Asimov formula and sort of expanded it, right? So that's sort of the idea behind the original Dune novels. It took the idea of an interstellar empire and kind of expanded on it, and turned a lot of sci-fi tropes on their heads too, sort of mixing. You know, Asimov was more your standard straight sci-fi, right? Dealing with exclusively sci-fi concepts, and whereas Frank Herbert, when he wrote Dune, he integrated a lot of what we call space fantasy into his work. So basically, I'm getting some lag in Photoshop here, so just bear with me. Oh yeah, look at that. All right, let's do this. Basically, there's the difference between Asimov and Dune. Sort of, there are a few major differences. So in Asimov's futuristic empire, right, both empires take place tens of thousands of years in the future. Asimov's empire, the main storyline of the Foundation takes place about 30,000 years into the future, or not 30,000 years, 25,000 years into the future. And computers and technology are still basically in wide use within the borders of the Foundation, and nuclear power and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna have to probably quit out of this. Yep, not responding. In any event, I'll have to just reopen Photoshop. And it's not going to save any of my changes. That's okay. Let's reopen it. So computers are in wide use in Asimov's Foundation, right? Robots are not. And that is one commonality between Asimov's future and Herbert's, is that the use of AI is explicitly banned, or AI past a certain point, right? So human intelligence level AI is explicitly banned in both universes. Both universes feature feudal interstellar empires. Both universes, again, take place tens of thousands of years in the future. Dune takes place around 34,000 years in the future, and I think Foundation takes place around 25,000 years in the future. That's what I just said. And I'm just waiting for Photoshop to get its act together here. I don't know why Photoshop is freezing up on me. You know, Adobe, the programs, I have to say, with Adobe, it's been getting clunkier and clunkier ever since they went to a subscription model. I noticed that's a pattern with a lot of hardware and software. Basically, they push you to go to this pay for model, the subscription models. So you don't own anything outright, and then they make the program buggy, and then they blame third-party software that you might be running. In the case of Apple, right? Adobe, they don't really care. It's just they're in the industry standard program, so people pay what they're going to pay for it. Let me quit preview. I'm going to force quit some of this stuff. text edit, quit, Google Chrome, leave that open, calendar open as well. I need that. That has my teaching schedule on it. Those of you who don't know, I teach a few institutions, both online and in person. Let me reset the workspace here. Workspace, reset essentials. All right. Also just checking my laptop now to make sure that it's up to snuff. It looks like it is. It actually looks like it saved a lot of my work here. So I'm actually just going to go in and continue where I left off. Now, what was I saying about Dune and Asimov before I got distracted by Adobe here? Yes. The differences and similarities between Asimov and Asimov's Foundation universe and Herbert's Dune universe. So again, you know, there's a lot of similarities there, right? Interstellar empires, tens of thousands of years in the future, feudal organizational structure, interstellar travel through slip space, you know, and banning of AI past a certain point. Now, the difference is the similarities, general similarities kind of end there. And then Herbert does a lot of, you know, he has a very distinctive sort of take, you know, where again, he's integrating a little bit more of space fantasy into the mix. Like what would if we actually had like very deep, you know, sort of characters with a very deep pathos, very flawed characters. You know, we had more of an action emphasis, more of a sort of narrative emphasis on the action itself. How would that play? And also, not only that, but like, how would the universe of Dune sort of work with, if we integrated other sort of fantasy tropes into the mix, like melee combat, and really leaning into like these things that are synonymous with like a feudal society, such as, you know, more of a reliance on analog technology, again, dealing with like the banning of AI. And on that note, let's get into it, right? Let's kind of talk about the setting of Dune and the main story of Dune. And as you can tell, I'm probably very excited because of the trailer that came out. And I think that there is some crossover with this channel, being that I'm doing Asimov fan art, and that, you know, in general, Herbert borrowed a lot from Asimov. Asimov was kind of the first one to deal with these sort of epic galactic settings, and then Herbert came in and again put more of his like sort of fantasy, space fantasy blueprint over the template that Asimov sort of created, right? Trailblazed. Basically, Dune takes place, like I said, 34,000 years in the future, and at this point in humanity's chronology, AI has been abandoned, has been banned. Human level artificial intelligence has been banned from wide use by humanity, due to the fact that humanity narrowly avoided extinction at the hands of AI 10,000 years prior to the events of the main story, in a conflict known as the Butlerian Jihad. And the Butlerian Jihad, also known as the revolt against the thinking machine, kind of sets up a lot of the background for the society that we find the main story taking place in, right? So in this society, computers, effectively artificial intelligence level computers, are banned. And not just, we're not talking just like robots, we're talking computers in general are pretty much banned. So how does humanity get by and maintain this galactic interstellar empire without the help of machines, thinking machines? The answer to that is humanity has shifted from an emphasis on computer processing technology to cultivating and pushing the limits of the potential of the human brain and the human mind, and also the human body itself, through various disciplines and organizations. Also, at this point, the science behind, like, you know, how to devise computers is still in existence, and the science behind advanced physics and starship propulsion is still very much a flourishing science, and that knowledge is not lost at all, and that knowledge is actually cultivated and guarded by you know, through many channels. So humans do have fold space technology in the Dune universe. It's called, it's FTL travel, and it's slip space technology, similar to that of Halo, where you create a whole fold in space and bring 2 points together in space that are distant on distant ends of the galaxy, for example. So, sort of like star drive, slip space technology, and that is coupled with the existence of mentats, which are these human computers. And these mentats' brains and cognitive functions are thousands of times superior to that of a normal human. And they're basically, like I said, walking computers, and they can perform computations better than, the machine computers that humanity used to employ. So you have the mentats to handle all of the computing of the empire. You have the guild highliners, which are the starships of the day that handle the interstellar travel and effectively have a monopoly on interstellar travel. So the guild highliners are owned by this organization called the Spacing Guild. And the Spacing Guild basically, like I said, it's a neutral organization that does not get involved in any wars, right? But what they do is they, for a fee, transport anybody who has the money to anywhere they want to go in the galaxy via one of their huge guild highliner ships. So what would happen is, if you have a smaller sublight starship, you would hitch a ride aboard one of these giant guild highliner ships, and they would take you where you want to go. And sometimes you might get multiple ships in a guild highliner, and sometimes you'll get multiple ships from 2 different warring houses that are using the same highliner. And while they're in space, the guild highliner is considered neutral ground. They will not fight each other, even if they're in a formally declared conflict, because they both need the guild. So the guild is sort of an interesting commentary on like unchecked corporate power, in my opinion. Being that they're a monopoly and everybody needs them, sort of like the analog of today would be Amazon, right? No one can tick off Amazon because we all need them to like deliver our products to us in a timely manner. But yeah, that would sort of be the conceit behind the guild, right? The Spacing Guild has a monopoly on space travel. And then all of the great feudal noble houses that control different swaths of the galaxy use them for their own ends. So they all have to stay on the guild's good side. Now, overseeing like this confederation of great feudal houses is an emperor called the Padishah Emperor, right? And again, the Padishah Emperorship was established shortly after the end of the Butlerian Jihad. And the current family, the Carino regime, has been in power for the last 10,000 years. So it's been the Carino Empire for as long as people can really remember. I'm trying really hard to be patient with the mixer brush here. And so basically that's the sort of backdrop. You have all these great feudal houses, none of which use conventional thinking machines, all of which are reliant on the Spacing Guild. All right. Now you might ask, how does the Spacing Guild do light speed calculations without the use of computers? Well, the Spacing Guild uses these individuals called guild navigators, which are mutated humans that can predict the future using prescience, right? They use prescience to predict potential hazards in space and calculate faster than light routes throughout the galaxy that avoid obstacles, so that space travel is effectively safe. And what allows these guild navigators to mutate into these beings that are capable of this is a spice called melange. Now, spice melange is because it allows the guild to amass all this power. It's an extremely valuable commodity. It's sort of the gold of space, right? It's sort of, it's like, you know, it's like the oil of space in the Dune universe. Extremely valuable substance. So melange is produced on the planet Arrakis, the desert planet Arrakis, also commonly known as Dune, the title of the story, right? That's where the title comes from. And so basically the story opens with our protagonist, Paul Atreides, a member of the great House Atreides, whose father, the Duke, has just inherited the fiefdom of Arrakis from his mortal enemies, the Harkonnens. Now, unbeknownst to Duke Leto, the Harkonnens and the Emperor are both concerned about the rising power of House Atreides and their budding alliance with another house, House Jinnaz. And so they've concocted this plan to get rid of House Atreides and make it look like an accident. So under false pretenses, they quote unquote offer the Duke the fiefdom of Arrakis. And the plan is, while the Duke is getting settled on Arrakis, the plan is for basically a quote unquote accident to happen to House Atreides. So the Harkonnens are going to launch a surprise attack, secretly buttressed by the Emperor's own fighting forces. And as you can imagine, this is a pretty dastardly plan. You know, the Harkonnens are real jerks. They're villains in the truest sense of the word. As you can imagine, Leto, being the Duke of a major house, is not a dumb man. He sort of suspects a trap, but he can't put his finger on it. So he's just telling his family members, be alert, be on your toes. Something's going to go down. We don't know what it is yet. And, you know, they go from there. So basically, that's the story so far, right? Right now, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of cleaning up this, adding a little more heat to this collarbone right here. I don't even mind that. I don't mind that it's kind of brush strokey. And maybe a little bit of heat to the neckline. So there's one other faction that I have not talked about. Basically, that faction is a sect of women called the Bene Gesserit. Now, the Bene Gesserit are a sect of women that basically have devoted themselves to achieving mental and physical perfection through complete control over their molecular structure, similar to the mutant apocalypse. You know how the mutant apocalypse in the X-Men series can basically control all the matter within his body down to almost a molecular or cellular level. The Bene Gesserit have a similar capability, albeit not on a molecular level, but on a cellular level. So they can control their metabolism, which allows them to sort of control their physical phenotype. They can also they learn how to increase cognition through, you know, extreme mental discipline. And this also allows this synergy of increasing cognition or intelligence and also increasing control of their bodies allows them to perform superhuman feats of strength, agility, and martial arts. So they're almost like female space wizards in a way. They're sort of the Dune equivalent of the Jedi Knights or the Aes Sedai in Wheel of Time. And the Bene Gesserit basically do this by, you know, they are able to, basically the goal of the Bene Gesserit is to steer humanity along what they call the golden path, or a path by which humanity will or I had that wrong. The golden path is actually not the Bene Gesserit. The goal of the Bene Gesserit is ultimately to control humanity through the cultivation of a super being. And this super being is supposed to come about as a result of their breeding programs. So basically, the Bene Gesserit concubine of Duke Leto has a son, Paul, who is this prophesied super being. And this is unknown to the galaxy at large in the beginning of the story, but it comes in to the story later on. So Paul and Duke Leto and the rest of the Atreides family are given Arrakis, and while they're there, the Harkonnens launch their surprise attack with the Emperor, and most of the Atreides family is massacred. Paul and the Lady Jessica, his mother, who's a Bene Gesserit, escape into the, to live another day. And basically they take refuge in the wilderness of Dune, and they come across the desert dwellers of Dune, the Fremen, who hate the Harkonnens. And eventually the Harkonnens are enlisted in helping Paul gain back control of Arrakis. And through this process, it's revealed that the destiny of Paul is to, destroy the Padishah Empire and take control of the galaxy and steer humanity along a path that he deems will be the optimal path for humanity, using his ability of prescience that he gained over the course of the story. It's sort of the manifestation of all his inborn genetic ability. And so there's this chosen one trope at play, but it's really cleverly done. And I rather like it. I think that, some people say, oh, it's a chosen one tropes are played out. But I mean, at this point, you got to remember this was the 60s when Herbert was writing these stories. It's not nearly as played out, right? Grab a little bit of this here. Like that. And again, I'm going to go back in and detail this necklace, probably soften some of the hair here. I also may need to clean my desktop. That could be the other reason my computer is running so god awful lately. I know if I take it to the Mac store, they're just going to blame third-party software, and they're going to tell me that I have the best computer on God's green earth, and I should be thanking my lucky stars that I'm able to afford one of their Macs, and that it's a privilege to buy from them. They're not actually going to tell me that, but that's kind of how they come across whenever I go into an Apple store. They're the most smug people ever. I mean, not the individuals. The individuals are very helpful, but their sort of company line is extremely smug. Whenever there's an issue with the Mac, it's never their fault. It's always the fault of, Adobe or Zoom or whatever. It's like, you know what, guys? I mean, you're going to charge me $3,000 for a computer. I think better work with industry standard third-party software like Zoom, right? I make my living using Zoom, so if I spend $3,000 on your computer and you're going to tell me that it doesn't support Zoom, well, that's a problem. You need to get with the program and make your computer work with whatever the industry standard software is, be it Zoom, be it, I don't know, MS-DOS, whatever. Come on, guys. Don't tell me it's third-party software. What did Judge Judy say? Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. Unreal. And again, I'm actually I'm becoming more interested in this thing called right to repair. Even though I'm really horrible with technology, I'm not techie at all. I do think you should be able to take your computer to an independent repair shop if you want. Why should your only option be to go to the freaking Genius Bar? Especially when, half the time they're going to give you they're not going to tell you what the cheapest option is because they want to bilk money out of you, right? So they're going to claim that you have no other option than to go through them. Give me a break. But in any event, I got sucked off on a tangent there. Sort of Apple rant, if you will. Getting back to Asimov and Herbert, I just, the trailer came out and it really was in a lot of ways just like I pictured it reading the book as a middle schooler. And I kind of wanted to touch on that because I discovered Frank Herbert's Dune and Asimov's Foundation at around the same time in middle school and early high school. I think my parents actually may have bought me Dune along with a cachet of Asimov novels because I was already reading the Foundation at that time, and I think they bought me a bunch of like sci-fi books, and there was a lot of Asimov, but in that one sort of clutch of books that they gave me, it was one day I found a copy of Dune and I started reading it, and my parents were like, "Yeah, this is a pretty big book. It's pretty famous. It inspired Star Wars. You should check it out." And I was kind of like, "Cool, I'll definitely check it out." I was very surprised because usually my parents were not. I mean, they supported my sci-fi habit, but they weren't, invested in it like I was. They're boomers, you know what I mean? So they're not really into like, they looked at it as like kid stuff. Yeah, it was kind of the mindset when I was growing up. The adults at the time when I was a kid, the adults in their 30s and 40s, all the boomers at that time kind of looked at it as kid stuff. You didn't have adults dressing up and going to cons back then, at least not at large. Now it's mainstream. Back then it wasn't, right? I think that started to really happen with Gen X, but then it really took off with people in my age group. And once people in my age group hit our 20s and 30s, we were going to comic conventions en masse and dressing up, and we were getting super invested in all these blockbuster sci-fi and fantasy franchises. I mean, Lord of the Rings, one of the reasons it was so popular, you can thank people my age for going to the movie theater and plunking down money on it in between exams. Thank your exennials, right? Your older millennials. They're the ones that put those movies over the top. I mean, and rightly so. Those movies were great. I remember seeing all of them in the theater. They were triumphs of cinema, man. They don't make movies like that. Literally do not make movies like that anymore. Like the way those movies were made today, they would be fast-tracked to smithereens. There would be a zillion things thrown in there by the people at the top. Jackson probably wouldn't be able to have the leverage he had back then now. There would be a lot more sort of quote unquote safe things done, safe decisions made by committee and story groups. Back then they made some bold creative choices, and they really, I mean, I will say that the one sort of blemish on their tenure, on New Line's tenure making Lord of the Rings, was the fact that the Tolkien estate was not happy with their adaptation of the material. But the Tolkien estate, really, I take what they say with a grain of salt, with all the love and respect with regard to J.R.R. Tolkien, right? Respectfully, with regards to him, the man, great visionary and genius that he was. He's not the Tolkien estate, right? The Tolkien estate is a collection of relatives, whoever else has the rights to his estate. I'm not privy to it, right? I'm just a regular dude. I don't know. Maybe it's his kids, his grandkids, who knows, right? But the people that make up the Tolkien estate have always sort of hated any adaptation of his work. And this also includes his son, Christopher, who also did a lot of good, I think, in like really keeping Tolkien's legacy alive and evangelizing the books. But he was a little bit of a stick in the mud when it came to some of the adaptations, right? And rightly so. He didn't want his father's work to be butchered. Now, I think that sort of bias to be very protective of his dad's work may have come into play when he was, in the initial discussions with New Line, right? And he's entitled to his opinion, right? I mean, he's entitled to be protective of his father's legacy. And we can agree to disagree with Christopher Tolkien on that point. But by and large, the Tolkien estate has always kind of hated any sort of adaptation outside of the books, right? With the exception, oddly enough, of this new Amazon show that's coming out. And like, I don't know. I mean, Amazon has deep pockets, so they can hire some really talented people, right? Same situation as Disney, like really horrible company in terms of their ethics, but really good company if you're creative to work for, right? Because what they can do is they can basically they can like they have the money to really pay you well as a creative and like you put you on top flight projects because their pockets are so deep. They have access to all these IPs. So I'm not going to begrudge any artist who would want to work for Amazon or the Amazon show, right? I would want to work for them, even though again I have a lot of problems with Amazon at large as a company. I would still, if they gave me the call, I'd go, because as an artist, especially an entertainment artist, it's a great opportunity to become a part of this larger and quite frankly exclusive community of top flight artists and get to work on a property that you love. And at least, you know, you can work your own sensibility into it, albeit on a very subtle and small level, but at least you have that opportunity to kind of leave your stamp on it, right? As an artist, that's such a rare opportunity. And you know, oddly enough, the evil mega corporation, right, is getting the most love from the Tolkien estate. So they must be having guys that are very talented that they've hired and put in charge running the show. Because from a story standpoint, you know, you have a lot of lore masters on, a lot of Tolkien scholars, lore masters. I mean, it's crazy. Tolkien literally has like scholars and lore masters. It's how sort of rich his mythos is. There's a lot of lore master, like scholars, that Tolkien scholars that apparently are also part of the project that have had good things to say. And I am optimistic ultimately that Amazon is going to come up. Like I think that they realize, because let's be honest, Amazon is in the business of making money, right? And if they don't put out something that's going to hit with the fans, and they're going to lose money, because the Tolkien fandom is, and kind of like the Tolkien estate, the Tolkien fandom, very protective of the legacy of the man himself. And also a very sort of intelligent and bright and thoughtful fandom. Like, it's not a dumb fandom. Like, there are a lot of, you have linguists, right? You have scholars, you have very educated people who appreciate education, academia, letters, who make up the Tolkien fandom, right? Tolkien himself was something of an academic, and I think there are a lot of people, you know, in that particular fandom who are bright people who won't stand for sort of like butchering of the man's work on screen. You're going to get a lot of blowback if you mess it up. And I think Amazon's aware of that, you know, because at the end of the day, they want to make money, and they're not going to jeopardize that. So they're going to hire the best people, and they're going to come up with a great story and a great, I don't want to use the word product, but a great tale for the fans. Because I don't think Tolkien would necessarily phrase his work in those terms. Tolkien was something of a, you know, I mean, I will say this. I don't think Tolkien the man would really approve of a company like Amazon or approve of a guy like Bezos. I think he would see right through Bezos for what he is, which is a vulture oligarch, right? Who's contributing to the slow death of this planet. But be that as it may, I don't want to get in the weeds with politics here. That's not the purpose of this channel. The purpose of this channel is sort of to evangelize art. So I don't want to offend anybody, and I don't want to, probably already offended a bunch of people, but just keep my political opinions to myself from now on, okay? I'll do my best, but be that as it may, I think Tolkien, you know, he lived through World War I and World War II, and I think he had a very sort of anti-industrialist, anti-oligarch, like frankly, para-primitivist, anti-technology streak in him, you know. So I think he would kind of resent a company like Amazon becoming such a sort of titanic force. I think he was very much all about returning to that provincial old English lifestyle, living close to the earth and living in harmony with nature, right? With, you know, he appreciated that culture, that old English way of living where, you know, the old sort of farmhouse way of life, Milltown, whatever. I mean, you know, in America, it was the farmstead, right? In England, it might have been like I said, the Milltown, the pub, the Milltown. I mean, people from Britain, help me out. In terms of like nostalgia, what qualifies as British nostalgia, right? Because I know in America, it's the Old West, it's the ranch, it's the homestead, right? Go homestead somewhere, put your flag in the ground. And I imagine in England, it's a little bit different, but I think Tolkien also taught at, I don't know if he taught at Oxford. The guy was legit. I mean, he taught at Oxford. He said legit credits to his name. I mean, Oxford is a 400-year-old institution. They don't just take anybody to teach there. To be quite intelligent or accomplished or know the right people, right? They're not going to just grab some guy out of the pub and be like, hey, you want to lecture at Oxford? That's not going to happen. So, I don't know. The guy was extremely educated, and so were his fans for the most part. And they're also it's a very drama-free fandom, which I appreciate. Although with the Amazon show, that might change, right? You might start seeing sort of the same garbage, frankly, that's happened with the Star Wars fandom and comic book fandom at large sort of infiltrate Lord of the Rings. I'm really hoping that doesn't happen. Last thing we need is, again, on both sides of the aisle, a bunch of reactionary politics seeping into something that really, had political overtones, but it wasn't done in such an on the nose way, right? It was an allegory in some ways for World War One. But even Tolkien, if you read his writings, he resisted the use of the term allegory. I don't think he really liked that term, and he was kind of a guy you couldn't really put him into a box. Very much sort of like, which was like more emblematic, I think, of the men of that time, is they had like a nuanced opinion or outlook on things, more so than I think not just men and women do today. Men and women tend to be more tribal today. Although, to be fair, at the beginning of the 20th century, there was certainly a fair share of tribalism going around. I mean, you had revolutions popping up everywhere, all over the planet. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm kind of meandering now. But in any event, very excited about the Amazon show. Very excited about Dune. I wanted to share these things with you as I go through and just mix sort of the forms here on our female character. Let me just save this. I don't know why this didn't save. Mule recovered. I guess we'll call this Mule recovered. It's Photoshop. The hamster that powers my laptop is getting tired, and when he gets tired, that's when I get the pinwheel of death. So it's looking pretty, not too shabby around the arm. I mean, she's got more angular features than Boris. Boris definitely made her look a little more exotic in his. But I've kind of made her a little more buxom in mine. He's such a master at figure painting, Boris. I mean, I feel like, you want to learn from the best and try and get into their heads. And whenever you can, doing a master copy is hugely beneficial. I told one of my students that today. I said, if you have the opportunity, do a master copy of, like, if you want to get good at, doing a style emblematic of Raphael, Da Vinci, or if you want to incorporate stylistic callouts that they put in their work into your own work, then do some master studies of their work. So this has been a little bit of a longer video. I actually have a corporate event that I'm running tomorrow. Looking forward to it. It's a superhero cartooning event. And this is just me decompressing before I jump into that business tomorrow evening. Bring this red. Cut this in a little bit. You also don't want to be a slave to the reference. I mean, I'm kind of going in here and can add a little more red. When I do digital paints, I also tend to mix my colors in a palette beforehand. Like I'll have a limited palette and derive all my colors from my limited palette as opposed to directly from my color picker. Unless I'm already painting from colors I've laid down previously. I'm never just like willy-nilly picking from the color picker. Excuse me. Let me just check the time here. It's 11:05, so I'm gonna wrap this pretty soon. See, load 50, mix. Load 50, mix 5, wet 9. That's what you want, the soft brown bristle. My net. Wait for that to increase. I'm trying to find my cursor. There it is. So one thing I don't like about, again, Photoshop. Okay, so my cursor is increased in size. It's just taking a year and a day for Photoshop to respond to my commands. Okay, let's do this. I'm gonna have to get a new glove. I've been actually not using my glove for a good portion of this painting. I think I might be scuffing up the screen. Get some of that core shadow going. Let's get some of that core shadow from this leg. I think after I shade this, I'll just cut it. Yeah, it's coming along. All right, I'm gonna save this. And then I'm gonna look at this from actual size. Not bad. All right, guys, that's about it for today. I will see you next week with a new video. Thank you for joining me as always, and talk shortly. All right, have a good day.